Continuing on, we have the inventory ratio, which is called inventory turnover. The ratio is annual cost of goods sold divided by inventory. Now, what this tells you is how many times in a year your inventory will turn over, how many times you will need to replenish your inventory. So, for instance, if your annual cost of goods is, say, $1 million, and your inventory is 250,000, then your inventory turnover would be 4 times, okay? 4 times in a year. Now, a side note that I want to make sure everyone understands about ratio analysis. Actually, there's 2 side notes. Number 1, different ratios will have critical import in different ways to different companies, okay? For instance, I've told you that there are 3 basic types of companies: service companies, distribution companies, and manufacturing companies. Service companies generally have 0 inventory. So the inventory turnover ratio, don't try to put a square peg in a round hole, it doesn't matter, okay? Distribution companies almost always sell with cash. You walk into Walmart, you pay them, and you walk out with the product. Guess what? ACP doesn't really matter much to a distribution company. So don't run a ratio hoping that it will tell you something when it doesn't matter to the company that you're trying to analyze, okay? You need to figure out what matters to what company. For instance, I had a student in corporate finance 3 or 4 months ago who took a look at Costco. And little did I know, they've been trying like heck to figure out the ACP. And what they had was 6.5 days or something. Oddly enough, what we found out is Costco does in fact do some invoice sales to corporations. But, of course, it's total sales, so that 6.5 day whatever was meaningless. It doesn't say a thing about how long from invoice to payment. However, inventory turnover, and I actually found out something absolutely fascinating. As big as Costco is, you've been to that warehouse, it's huge. Their inventory turnover was 12 times. They have such superb asset management that they turn over, on average, that entire warehouse once a month. It's absolutely stunning. Okay, anyway, that's one thing. The other thing I want you to understand about ratios is they have value in and of themselves. But where they really take on value for the financial analyst is in comparison, okay? For instance, this year you might have a 45-day ACP. Is that good, bad, indifferent, whatever? Well, you can kind of say, well, I guess it's pretty good. Tell me what last year's was. Was last year's 48 days? Sweet. I'm reducing the amount of time that other people have my money. Okay? On the other hand, was last year 43 days? Ooh, people are taking slightly longer to pay me. That's indicative of a problem. Maybe maybe I have to take steps, okay? If last year was 35 days, maybe I have to start generating statements, taking some kind of action to address a negative trend, okay? So in comparison, same thing with the coverage ratios. If you had a coverage ratio of 1.5 and that came from 1.7, it's deteriorating. You don't want to see that. You want to figure out what's going on. And that's one of the powers of ratios, is it can tell you where to look. It can be a flag for you. Business is complicated. The world's complicated. Ratios give you a quick and dirty, hey, we're good. Or, watch out, here, you may have a problem. Okay. Hopefully that all makes sense. Now, there's another aspect in which I want to talk about the asset management ratios. And that is, there's something called the operating cycle that's really important to be aware of. And I'm going to drift over here. The operating cycle is the time from which inventory, on average, comes in your back door, sellable inventory, until it becomes cash. Okay? Now, in fact, yeah, for your purposes, Arturo, this could be a real important one. Inventory to sale. And we'll put invoice there because sale and invoice are instantaneous. Sale, invoice to cash. This length of time right here can be defined by the inventory turnover. So, if on average you have a 4 times turn, say, well, 4 times turn means the inventory on average takes 90 days to sell. Okay? So this is 90 days. Again, this is just hypothesizing a 4 times turn. Now, let's say your invoice, let's say your ACP is 45 days. What that means is your operating cycle, 90 plus 45, it takes 135 days on average from the time inventory walks in your back door until it becomes cash. Okay? 135 days. But wait, there's a kicker here. Let's say you've got the same deal that you give your customers, and when you get inventory, you get billed for it by your supplier. And let's say, hypothetically, that your terms are net 30 days, and on average, you take 45 days. What that means is, takes you 135 days to get cash out of the inventory that comes in your back door. But wait, you've got to pay for it in 45 days. That difference has to be financed. Okay? And believe me, every financial person in the world is painfully aware of that difference, and that's why the combination of inventory turnover and ACP is absolutely critical. Okay? Another thing I need to mention about inventory turnover that's really important to understand if you're the finance person, particularly for a small business. And that is, there will always be a portion of your inventory that doesn't sell. Okay? So, you, on the first day of the year, bring in $100,000 of stuff. Let's say 10% of that doesn't sell. So you've got $10,000 there, but you're a small business. You don't want to write that off. You don't want to just whatever. So you leave it on the books. Okay? Every small business in the world does this. So the next year you're starting with $10,000 in effect, dead inventory. And let's say you then get another 100,000. So now you have 110,000. But let's say that you again have 10% in non-sellable inventory. And 10% is low, by the way. So what do you then come to at the end of the year? You've got another 11,000 there that's dead inventory. Now you've got 21,000 in dead inventory. Over 20% of your total inventory is non-sellable. The moral of the story being, natural business, unless you make a choice, bite the bullet, have the guts to recognize what dead inventory is and deal with it, whether you deal with it as in selling it for half price, selling it for cost, donating it and getting a tax deduction, whatever you need to do. The one thing you can't do is simply leave it on the shelves and leave the value on the books. Because what will happen is your inventory, doing everything else right, your inventory turnover will decrease. Your inventory value will increase, even though in reality you only have the same amount of inventory satisfying the customer. You've got dead inventory. You do that for 5, 6, 8, 10 years, and you're in a lot of trouble. You've got an inventory valuation that's completely out of whack with the reality of what you've got in the back as sellable merchandise. Okay?